Sahana Bhavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavai, Tejas Fridhavaditamastu, Mavivishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om, peace, peace, peace. And good evening. Well, I hope you had a better day than I did. I had a very taxing day in literal sense. I had to prepare the sales tax and the 1099 forms. So hopefully I can stay conscious during this. And ironically, our topic is God consciousness. So here we go. This is an article by Swami Abhidananda again. And just to remind those who might just be tuning in, he was one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, and he spent over 20 years lecturing in the United States. And he was the last of the direct disciples to pass away. Well, has it been said by Ralph Waldo Emerson, the great poet-philosopher America has produced, that, quote, a man is the facade of a temple wherein all wisdom and all good abide. What we commonly call man, that eating, drinking, planting, counting man, does not, as we know him, represent himself, but misrepresents himself. Him we do not respect, but the soul, whose organ he is, would he let it appear through his actions, would make us kneel, our knees bend, unquote. The eating, drinking, planting, counting man is limited and imperfect, and is what we call the apparent man. But the real man is free and all-wise, divine and always happy. The soul in each individual is a center of that circle whose circumference is nowhere, but whose center is everywhere. That circle is called the universal spirit. Now that reminds me of what John Dobson used to tell us, is that everyone was the center of their own observable universe. So no matter who you are or where you are, you can see out and as far as the universe will let you see. And at some point, the universe is expanding away from you, and everything out there is moving away from you at or beyond the speed of light, and it's no longer part of your universe. And so, in that sense, everyone is the center of their own universe. So this analogy is quite apt. The universe, although technically the observable universe is not infinite, since it's always expanding, it has that sense of being infinite. And everyone is at the center. Every soul is at the center. And every soul is, of course, the spark of that infinite spirit. The Atman and Brahman are one. Going on, it is the source of infinite wisdom, all knowledge, all truth, all science, all philosophy, art, beauty, and love. And so that's why we often say that those aspects of art, beauty, philosophy, science, learning, and so forth, those are aspects of the goddess Saraswati, who represents the Sattva Guna. They're the most revealing things in this world. They are most revealing of the true nature that is behind, the true nature of Brahman. But even that, of course, is a veil. It's just a much thinner veil. This unlimited circle of infinite wisdom is the real background of each apparent individual. Not knowing that the eternal river of wisdom is constantly flowing within him, the apparent man seeks here and there and struggles for a drop of knowledge to satisfy his intellectual thirst, like the fool who stands on the banks of a mighty river and digs a well for water to quench his thirst. We do not know how wise and good we are in reality. It takes a long time to discover that all wisdom and all goodness dwell in each individual soul. We are now seeking wisdom from outside because we are thinking by mistake that it will come from outside. The great sages, prophets, and wise men of the past were those who knew the secret of unlocking that door which prevents the outrush of that inexhaustible river of wisdom which is constantly flowing behind each individual ego. When the all-wise self begins to manifest its higher power, the apparent man is called an inspired seer of truth. Then he realizes his divine nature and ceases to live like the animals and attains to the state of God consciousness, which is the highest goal of spiritual unfoldment. Then he is truly religious and reaches the goal of all religions. All religions are like so many attempts of the human mind to rise above the animal plane, to go beyond the senses, to know the reality, and to reach that state of God consciousness. And Swami Vedanta was quite a powerful yogi. That path was one of his strongest suits, you could say. I don't know how many are familiar with bridge anymore, but in bridge, 4 players are dealt the entire deck of cards, and so you have a mixture of hearts, clubs, diamonds, and spades. And normally you end up with 3 of 3 suits and 4 of another suit. That's the most common. But you might not have any cards in one suit, or you might have only 1 or 2 cards in a suit and a lot of cards in some other suit. So the 4 yogas are like that. We each have our strongest suit and the ones that aren't so strong. And but hopefully we can sort of balance all of them out because they all kind of depend on each other. So he's making some very good points here, is that in reality, our true nature is already realized. It's already God conscious. But this apparent man that we tend to identify with doesn't see it that way. It's like in the dream state, we don't realize we're in the dream state until we wake up. And so we think all the things in our dream are real. And so similarly, we're not in our God conscious state here. And so we think that this world of Maya is the highest reality that there is. But of course, that's not. This is sort of like a mirage or like a magic show or like a oh dear, what do you call that when you have lasers that create a hologram? Sort of like a holographic universe. All right. And so, of course, the human species evolved out of the animal species, and so we have a lot of similarities with our animal friends, and our genetic programming is all coming from them. It's all evolved through all the other different kinds of living organisms. In fact, I think we have something like 75% of our DNA is in common with certain plants even. So it doesn't take too many changes in your genes to create a new species. But so our genes are programmed for what all genetic species are programmed to do, survive. They wouldn't be around if they weren't programmed to try to survive. And so that's what our genes keep telling us to do. And that isn't necessarily the best way to try to realize your true nature, because your true nature is beyond the body-mind complex. And so if you're constantly engaged with the idea of how do you survive, which tends to create aspects of selfishness, that's counter to your goal of God consciousness. Now, there's also some sociological evidence that that part of our programming is to be a social animal and to cooperate. So at least we have some redeeming social values to our current genetic program. Not all species have that. Some species are very independent, but some species do work in groups and learn to cooperate. But of course, this tends to, certainly in the earliest part of our evolution, it stopped at the tribal family level or the tribal level. And so you were unselfish within your family or your tribe, but you were still in conflict with your neighboring tribes, the tribes that you were in conflict with. In fact, Ken Wilber and other psychologists and thinkers have speculated that our evolution depends on our increasing circle of care and compassion. And so the more that we increase our circle of compassion and care, the more evolved we are. In India, from the Vedic period down to the present time, this attainment of spiritual perfection or God consciousness has been regarded as the highest aspiration and the loftiest aim of humanity. True religion begins when the soul of man realizes this God consciousness, and not until then. The man who reaches this state does not seek anything from outside of himself. He finds all wisdom within his own soul. Amongst the Hindus, from the most ancient times, the attainment of God consciousness has been the theme of rich and poor, of kings and beggars, of saints and sinners. It was for this attainment that many kings and princes renounced their thrones and sacrificed their wealth, name, fame, comforts, luxuries, in short, everything that was dearest to them. All the noble qualities which adorn the character of sages and make a man godly in this life are but the outcome of the attempts for the attainment of God consciousness. So, and he's going to go into this in more detail, but of course, religions give us a framework to practice various spiritual disciplines. So they have their purpose. But just to belong to a religion or believe in a religion doesn't get you anywhere. You have to actually be doing the practices and realizing that the truth is eventually going to come from realization within and not from somewhere else. Now, of course, great saints and gurus and teachers can awaken our spiritual spark, but it still depends on us being ready for that. All the noble qualities which adorn the character of sages and make a person godly in this life are but the outcome of the attempts for the attainment of God consciousness. Is there anything more ennobling, more sublime, more divine than the matchless purity of heart, serene childlike simplicity, lofty self-abnegation, and disinterested love for all which are displayed in the character of one who is conscious of his divine nature? No, such characters are the beacon lights that are ever shedding their guiding rays on our toilsome path and beckoning us onward to the haven of realization. And just as in any endeavor, if you see somebody who is an outstanding musician, an outstanding instrumentalist or singer, or an outstanding artist, or an outstanding athlete, or an outstanding businessman, you become inspired to follow their example and to learn from them. So similarly, when you see a great spiritual person, they inspire you to strive for those same goals because you can see how their character it literally is a beacon of light. Sometimes people can actually sense that kind of glow about somebody. They just have a certain something about them that's different. We had one devotee who became a very close devotee who noticed that in one of his co-workers. And he asked him, what made him different from everybody else. He seemed to be a little bit more calm and peaceful than everybody else. And so he told him about the temple, and he started to come. All right, going on. They are the manifestations of God on earth. They are worshipped by the vast majority of mankind as the incarnations of God. They express in their lives the ultimate goal of all religions. The ordinary or apparent man is self-deluded and blind to truth, is imperfect and limited in every way, and has no spiritual character, being ruled only by self-interest. Notice he's very careful to call this the apparent man, because none of these things are true of your true spirit. All of us know that we are now living more or less selfish lives and acting under limitations, that we are not exactly what we wish to be. During the calm moments of our lives, we sometimes look at ourselves and feel that our souls, like eagles, are free by nature and able to soar into infinite space, but are now enchained by selfishness and confined in the cages of gross human bodies. And of course, our true nature is always there, and that's what keeps driving us forward. Unfortunately, a lot of times it drives us forward in ways that aren't terribly productive. It's again, John Dobson used to say, Maya is made up of frustration, and our true nature is infinite, undivided, and unchanging, and so we tend to seek for these things in terms of, instead of the infinite, we seek for freedom in the world. Instead of the undividedness, we seek for just ordinary love in the world. And instead of the unchanging aspect, we just search for peace and security. And so we seek those in the world, but they tend to conflict with each other. How many wars have been sought in order to gain freedom? Well, it's not a terribly peaceful way to do it, you see. So you've lost your peace in order to gain your freedom. And you can just think about how you go about getting any one of those three things and how it tends to conflict with at least one of the other three. It's a good way to read history or read a novel and analyze what the characters are doing and why they're doing what they're doing and what's motivating them. At such times, we realize our bondage and seek freedom, longing to fly into the infinite space of eternal bliss, and we struggle hard to break our chains, to throw down the barriers which confine us, and to conquer all environments which keep us in bondage. Each individual soul is born to combat nature and her laws. Our lives consist in the constant effort of our soul to overcome the limitations imposed by them. The forces of nature are trying to drag the soul in one direction, while the inner forces impel the soul to resist and rise superior to them. The soul does not want to follow like a slave. It is struggling to subdue nature and to dominate over her laws. This struggle is the cause of the social as well as of the spiritual progress of humanity. And so again, this, as I was saying before, our genetic programming is going in one direction and makes us want to just sort of go with our natural instincts. But our natural instincts are to survive and procreate. And that's the way the genes survive. And so your genes program you to survive. So you have to, in a sense, fight that particular nature. Man who does not know how to fight against nature and how to gain victory over her laws, but who, on the other hand, follows her blindly, is an uncivilized person, is a savage, and is on the level with the lower animals. And so I think it helps to understand why we have the kind of natural urges that we have that make us work the way most people do that haven't really developed very far. The whole of humanity teaches us this fact. If we study external nature, we find that nature tells us, obey my laws and commands. But we say, no, why should we? Perhaps some of you are as old as I am and remember the old commercial where margarine was trying to imitate butter, and Mother Nature comes out and says, it's not nice to fool Mother Nature. Usually Mother Nature doesn't want to be fooled. So she wants us to obey her laws and just eat butter. So, no, why should we? We are thy masters. Thou must obey. Physical nature tells us to go naked and live in caves or forests like the animals, without any cover overhead. But we say, no, we shall have clothes and proper shelter. We obtain them. Nature would destroy them, but we protect them by our strength and preserve ourselves from heat and cold and changes of weather by which nature would make existence impossible for us. And in the end, we succeed. And sometimes I wonder if we succeed. It seems like this is another example of the dog's curly tail. we try to find some way to outsmart nature, and it tends to create another problem, which we then have to solve. We start chopping down all our forests to create wood products and paper products, and then we discover plastic, so that'll save a lot of trees. And now we've got so much plastic waste, we don't know what to do with that. And so then you've got to solve that problem. And the same thing with energy. We've got a nice source of energy from coal, and then it made the air dirty, so we cleaned the air up. But we didn't realize that CO2 was just as bad a component of the smog as the rest of it. And so now we've got the CO2 problem and global warming problem. And so it just goes on and on like that. Every time we try to solve a problem, we probably solve that problem and create another one along the way. So it keeps us very busy. What else have we got to do, right? And nature would destroy them, but we protect them with all our strength and preserve ourselves from heat and cold and changes by weather which nature would make existence impossible for us. And in the end, we succeed. How do we succeed? By studying nature and her laws, and by utilizing her forces in such a way as to make her obey our commands. And again, we're probably going to do everything we can to solve the problem of global warming. And then we'll probably have some super volcano put a bunch of ash in the atmosphere and cause a global winter. And we'll wish we could make it hotter again. Or there'll be massive earthquakes, and all of the electrical lines will be short-circuited, or there'll be a giant solar flare that hits the Earth and knocks out all the satellites. So all of these things that we're doing to try to be smarter could easily be knocked out by the forces of nature in one easy accident, you could say. Mother Nature can do all sorts of things very, very quickly. And as we can see, the hurricanes are getting worse. And ironically, the snowstorms seem to be getting worse. Even though there's global warming, there seems to be heavier snowstorms. So we get it from both ends. We have an ice sheet the size of Florida that's broken off from Antarctica, which eventually will make the sea levels rise. Also cool a lot of the ocean currents, could disrupt the ocean currents, which could change the climate. So we got lots of interesting problems we're going to have to solve. This victory of man over physical nature is due to those higher powers which are latent in the soul. The powers which overcome nature are nothing but the intelligence and willpower possessed by human beings. The one who conquers is higher than the one who is conquered. Therefore, physical nature is weaker than the powers of intelligence and will. And again, to a certain extent. Similarly, if we study internal nature, we find there also is a constant struggle between the higher and the lower mind. In the yogic sense, we're the winner, but in the physical sense, it's going to be a constant battle. So there's a constant struggle between the higher and lower mind, between the higher and the lower intelligence, between the higher and lower willpower, between the spiritual real or divine man, and the apparent or animal man. The lower mind, lower intelligence, lower will, or the something is wrong. Oh, the apparent or animal man is that which obeys the physical and sensuous needs of the body, as a slave obeys a master. The higher mind, higher intelligence, higher will, the spiritual, the real or the divine in man, is that which tries to conquer and subdue the lower nature and dominate over it. Of course, we do not find this fight in the lower animals, nor in those who live like them. When this struggle begins, we are no longer purely animal, but we are human or moral. To be human or moral, however, is not to be perfectly spiritual. We make a distinction between the moral and spiritual planes. The moral plane is the intermediate stage. The moral man is partly animal and partly spiritual. And of course, this is why all the different religious traditions tend to put out moral codes. And the moral codes help one to control the animal nature and move upwards towards the spiritual. So it's an intermediate stage. Now, many of those moral codes are based on particular circumstances of the culture and the times, and some of them are really not absolute laws. They're not absolute moral laws, but unfortunately, many religions make them absolute moral laws and have all sorts of horrible punishments for people that don't obey them. And that's probably more distracting to spiritual life than it is conducive to spiritual life. So, like so many things that we humans do, there are pluses and minuses. Certainly, trying to be more moral is a step towards spiritual perfection, but carrying them too literally and carrying out things that were relevant 2,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago is probably not terribly helpful. In a moral man, there is a constant struggle between the animal and spiritual nature. The moral man strives to overcome the animal in him by fighting against it and by constantly watching his mind to prevent the lower or animal nature from spreading its influence over him. A moral man must, as far as possible, strive to avoid temptation, because he is not yet strong enough to overcome its influence. His effort must be to rise to the higher plane, which is beyond temptation. This struggle will cease only when the animal nature is completely conquered and the moral man has become truly spiritual or divine. When that stage has been reached, there will be no room for temptations. As long as a man is struggling with the animal nature, he is ethical, but when he has conquered it completely, he is spiritual. The moral man can be tempted by animal attractions, but the truly spiritual man is far above all temptations, and he is beyond the reach of the lower tendencies and animal propensities that trouble the moral man. I'm afraid this reminds me of a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta again, the same one that I mentioned before, Iolanthe. In that particular operetta, this person who happens to be half a fairy and half mortal is fallen in love with one of the wards of the Lord Chancellor. And she's underage, and she won't be of age until 2 years. And so basically the Lord Chancellor has the say of who she's going to marry. But he can't resist, and she can't resist, because nature has told him that he should marry her. And it doesn't matter that they're breaking all these conventions and laws. He says that the brooks and the trees and the leaves and so forth, they've all beckoned him to marry this young lady. The Lord Chancellor counters that he hasn't seen any affidavits from nature to support his claims. So anyway, this was a good example of somebody who can't resist his lower nature. In a truly spiritual man, all struggle of this sort has ceased forever. Then the true spirit, or the divine nature in man, reigns in its own glory and appears like the self-effulgent sun above the clouds of selfishness and imperfections. The angels are the personified higher powers of the true spirit, nay, the whole world bows down before the victorious conqueror and sovereign of nature. And of course, Swami Vivekananda would always remind us that unselfishness is the test of true religion. And so here, Swami Vedanta is certainly supporting that idea that selfishness is one of the key factors in overcoming our lower nature. That is the state which was attained by Buddha in Christ. The Prince Gautama, or Sakyamuni, became the Buddha, and Jesus of Nazareth became the Christ, when each obtained the state of God consciousness. Whosoever reaches that realization becomes perfect and free from selfishness and all other imperfections. Man alone can reach such a state of God consciousness. The lower animals and those who live like them must evolve to the human or moral plane first, before they can even attempt to attain that state of God consciousness. So you see, unselfishness is a natural consequence of gaining this God consciousness. And so the more we can emulate the qualities that occur once you become God conscious, the closer you are to realizing that God consciousness. So that's why the idea of unselfishness is emphasized. As the animal nature evolves into the moral or human plane, the power of reaching this state is gradually developed, and the individual ego enters upon the different stages of spiritual unfoldment. When it reaches the ultimate point, it is conscious of its divine nature. That point is the climax of spiritual development of the apparent ego. It is the state of eternal bliss and perfection. Now, he keeps talking about our animal nature, but if you observe a lot of animals, you'll notice that some of them are unselfish. Some of them are extremely loving towards each other. Some of them, especially the females, tend to have that mother instinct of caringness that extends even beyond her own kids. And so you can see this unselfish attitude even in some of the animals. And there are lots of YouTube videos on remarkable ways that animals have helped members of other species or human beings and so forth. And other times where they've asked for help from human beings. They understand that humans can actually help them. And so they put down their natural hunting instincts or fearful instincts of humans and ask for help. And then they become friends for life with these humans or with these other animals. So it's interesting to see that there are these more moral characteristics even in the animals. To say that all animals have no moral nature to them really is not true. Perhaps their natural instinct may not be as strongly developed towards these moral ideas as we are, but there's some of them still do manifest them. We cannot think of another state higher than that of God consciousness, because in this state the soul communes with divinity and is united with the infinite source of love, wisdom, and intelligence. Now, of course, the Advaitist would say there's the state beyond that where you're merged in the absolute Brahman, but you can't talk about that state. So if you're going to sit here and write something about it, you're going to be talking about the God consciousness where you're in communion with your chosen ideal or an avatar of some sort. Become one with the Father in heaven or the infinite spirit. Can you imagine any state higher than the state of the union of the individual soul and the universal spirit? So maybe he's already implying that union of Atman with Brahman that goes beyond that. Thus we see that there are three principal stages through which the apparent ego passes before God consciousness is attained. First, the animal nature, which must be overcome by the human or moral nature. Secondly, the moral nature, which is in turn must develop into a spiritual nature. And when a man is on the animal plane, he is extremely selfish, bound by desires, and is a slave of passions and sense pleasures, which have no restrictions of any kind. He has no purity, no moral standard of life or of truthfulness. His highest ideal is the comfort of his body, and he abhors things spiritual, thinking it is a loss of time and energy to even hear about his spiritual nature or to speak of it at all. But when such a man wakes up from this deep sleep of ignorance and self-delusion, either naturally or through the help of a holy guru or spiritual teacher, he begins to seek the moral life. This is a state of awakening of the soul. It is a stage of a beginner in the path of God consciousness. Then he tries to live a moral and virtuous life and begins to examine his own nature, tries to learn his own faults and weaknesses, and having discovered them, strives to correct them. This is the state of purification of the soul and is a second stage of spiritual unfoldment. It is called in Sanskrit sadhaka, or the neophyte state. A neophyte should struggle hard to conquer his nature, to subdue his passions, and to overcome, by controlling all his habits, the tremendous forces which the animal nature exerts. Before we go too much further, and I forget what I wanted to say, another overgeneralization which some people make is that all capitalistic business people are totally selfish, and that's not really the case either. Some of them are viciously selfish and viciously cutthroat and trying to get rid of all their competition. But some of them are much more enlightened, and they do a lot of good things for their community. They make foundations which donate a lot of money. There's even one example where a person made billions of dollars and died without any wealth at all. He had given it all away. He never lived in a fancy home. He never bought a fancy car. He just kept giving it away. He earned it all and he gave it all away. Or the example of Jamshid Tata in India, where he basically built a whole city, built a huge industry that created a lot of jobs, created all sorts of parks, schools, retirement homes, hospitals, you name it. So there are many examples of people of wealth that have done a lot of good things for people. They're not all just robber barons, as we used to say, even though there are, unfortunately, many of those too. All right. If he does not know how to do this, mainly controlling his habits and his animal nature, he should follow the instructions of one who knows, or of one who has realized the state of God consciousness. He must not forget his ideal in this everyday life, and he must try to be always on his guard against temptation. Especially must he remember that one cannot know the highest truth unless he is truthful himself. Truth cannot be obtained by falsehood. Truth must be gained by truth. If we are not truthful, we are not ready to reach that state. So a Neophyte should try to be truthful in every word and action, because just so far as he fails in this, will he fail to reach eternal truth. Now, there's one thing that really bothers me in our modern life, is we're constantly having to check a box that says we've read these 30 pages of fine print about all the conditions. I doubt many of us have read all of that stuff when we check that box. So it bothers me that we have to keep checking this box, because you can't go on. And I'd still be reading those things and not checking any of those boxes if I had actually read them. So that bothers me. I don't know what to do about it. So if anybody out there's got an idea, let me know. 4 things are absolutely necessary for purification of heart and for conquering the animal nature. First, self-control, which includes the control of senses and the control of mind for the practice of concentration. Secondly, truthfulness Thirdly, disinterested love for all. Fourthly, unselfish works. In one of the Upanishads we read, "He shall not attain to spiritual perfection who has not ceased to follow wicked ways, who has not subdued his senses, who has not controlled his mind by concentration, and who is not truthful and kind to all." These lines contain the whole of ethics and the essence of all the scriptures of the world. The secret of spiritual progress lies in the practice of these four. Whether we believe in God or not, whether we have faith in any prophet or not, if we have self-control, concentration, truthfulness, and disinterested love for all, then we are on the way to spiritual perfection. On the contrary, if one believes in God or in a creed and does not possess these four, he is no more spiritual than an ordinary man of the world. In fact, his belief is only a verbal one. Wherever these qualities are manifested, we should remember that there the spiritual unfoldment of the soul powers have commenced. During the process of spiritual evolution, the powers of self-control, concentration, etc., which are latent in each soul, begin to unfold from within and manifest themselves in the works of everyday life. And so, indeed, many people mistakenly think, well, if I just belong to a religion and recite a creed that says I believe this, that, and the other thing, that saves them somehow. And they don't really practice these four things in order to really achieve what they should be achieving. So I'm going to take a moment to give you a preview of what's going to happen in February. We have a big month. February is a small month, but it's going to be full of activities. And so we have two pujas. We all have Shivaratri on Sunday the 15th. It actually falls on Sunday the 15th. We haven't moved it to a Sunday. We usually do Shivaratri on the actual day, as opposed to the Titi pujas, the birthday pujas of Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, Vivekananda, and Brahmananda. We move them to a reasonably close Sunday so that more people can attend. And so Sri Ramakrishna's Puja Day will be celebrated on the 22nd. We have a special visitation from Swami Sarvapriyananda. He was invited to the Northern California Center and very kindly informed us that he would be in California and offered to come down to see us. So he'll be here on Tuesday the 10th. So have a special day on Tuesday the 10th, then Shivaratri on the 15th, Ramakrishna Puja on the 22nd. Our crystal bowl meditation will be the Friday before Shivaratri on the 13th. So we'll probably have a theme around Shiva. And Brahmanam will be on the 7th. And the Vivekananda House retreat will be on the 8th. And the Pinyon Hills will have a retreat in the morning on the 7th. So lots of things happening this particular month. Jayaprana has her chanting classes, and Sukirta has her Sanskrit class, and so forth. So make sure you pick up a bulletin or look on it online at the bulletin to get all of the information on all of these different events. All right, so let's close with a chant. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace.